June 15, 1944. Just inland from Saipan, Mariana Islands, the air trembles with heat and the constant thud of distant explosions. Private First Class Daniel Reeves presses himself into the volcanic sand, his helmet rattling as another shell lands somewhere beyond the ridge. The smell of cordite hangs thick, mixing with the sharp scent of burned vegetation ahead. The jungle line flickers with movement, contacts, left flank, someone shouts, Reeves turns, heart hammering. Through the haze, shadowy figures dart between palm trunks, Japanese infantry, advancing fast, using the terrain like ghosts. The Americans are pinned, caught in a shallow depression with nowhere to go. Then comes a different voice, calm, precise, observer to red battery. Fire mission. Grid coordinates follow. Lieutenant James Carter, a forward observer attached to the infantry platoon, crouches beside a battered SCR-300 radio set. Sweat drips from his chin as he reads off numbers, each one deliberate, each one critical. The radio crackles in reply, red battery copies. Adjust fire. Over. Carter doesn't hesitate. He peers through binoculars, tracking movement at the tree line. He adjusts slightly, add 200. Left 50. Fire for effect. Reeves glances at him, confused. The enemy is barely 300 yards away. There's no time, and yet, Carter remains still. Seconds pass, then a thunderclap, not from the jungle, but from behind. The first American artillery shells scream overhead, their high-pitched whine slicing through the chaos. Reeves flinches instinctively, pressing into the dirt. The impact is immediate, the jungle line erupts in a wall of fire and dirt. Trees snap like matchsticks. The advancing Japanese troops vanish into a storm of shrapnel and shockwaves. Another volley follows. Then another, perfectly timed. Reeves lifts his head, stunned. Just moments ago, the enemy had been closing in. Now, the entire approach has been obliterated, turned into a shattered wasteland. How the hell, he mutters. Carter lowers his binoculars, already speaking into the radio again. Shift right 100. Continue fire. Behind them, miles away, unseen artillery crews are adjusting their aim in real time, guided by Carter's voice, his eyes, his calculations. Reeves watches as the shells land exactly where the enemy had been seconds before and not after, exactly when it mattered. Across the battlefield, Japanese soldiers, trained, disciplined, and expecting close combat, find themselves caught in something entirely different. There is no warning, no gradual escalation, only sudden destruction. In less than 2 minutes, the attack has collapsed. The jungle falls silent again, save for the crackle of fires and the distant rumble of artillery repositioning. Reeves exhales slowly, barely believing what he's just witnessed. Artillery, he whispers, but this isn't the slow, pre-planned bombardment he had heard about in training. This is something faster. Smarter. Deadlier. This is war directed in real time, and for the first time, both sides are beginning to understand just how devastating that can be. June 15, 1944. Forward observation post, Saipan. The smoke hasn't fully cleared when Lieutenant James Carter shifts position, crawling up the slight incline for a better view. His uniform is streaked with ash, his hands blackened from dirt and grease, but his eyes remain fixed, sharp, searching, calculating. Beside him, the SCR-300 hums softly, its operator adjusting the frequency, signals holding. Sir, the radio man says, tapping the side of the set. Carter nods but doesn't look back. His binoculars sweep the broken jungle line. The earlier barrage has carved a scar across the terrain, splintered trunks, churned earth, and bodies hidden beneath debris. But he knows better than to assume it's over. It never is movement, he murmurs, there, just beyond the impact zone. A flicker of motion. Then another. Survivors, Japanese infantry, regrouping. They move low and fast, instinctively avoiding open ground. Some drag wounded comrades. Others clutch rifles, scanning for targets. They've learned quickly, stay dispersed, stay hidden, but Carter has learned faster. He lowers the binoculars and grabs the handset. Observer to red battery. New target. Grid coordinates incoming. His voice is steady, almost detached. Around him, rifle fire begins to pick up again as American infantrymen engage targets at the edge of visibility. Private Reeves, still catching his breath, watches Carter with a mix of awe and disbelief. You can see them, he asks. Carter doesn't answer immediately. He adjusts the focus again, tracking a cluster moving along a shallow ravine. Yes, he says finally. And they think we can't. He keys the radio, drop 100. Right 75. Fire 1 round. Adjust. Miles away, in a concealed artillery position, a battery of 105mm howitzers pivots with mechanical precision. Crews move with practiced efficiency, loading shells, setting fuses, aligning barrels based on Carter's coordinates. Back on the ridge, time stretches, then a single shell whistles overhead. It lands short, just at the edge of the ravine. Dirt erupts. The Japanese soldiers scatter. Carter watches closely. Add 50, he says instantly. Fire for effect. This time, there is no delay. A full volley answers. The shells descend in rapid succession, each one walking forward into the ravine with chilling accuracy. Explosions chain together, sealing off escape routes, collapsing cover, turning concealment into a trap. Reeves flinches again, but he doesn't look away from his position. It feels almost unreal, like the battlefield itself is being controlled by an unseen hand. But for the Japanese troops below, the reality is far more immediate. There is no visible enemy directing this fire. No artillery pieces in sight. Only sudden, precise destruction that follows their movements as if anticipated. Confusion spreads. Some try to retreat, only to run into the next barrage. Others freeze, unsure of where the next strike will fall. The timing is relentless, not random, not delayed, perfect. Carter exhales slowly, lowering the handset. Target neutralized, he says behind him. Reeves shakes his head. They didn't even get close. Carter finally turns, meeting his gaze. That's the idea. He looks back toward the jungle, his expression tightening. This isn't about stopping them when they reach us, he adds. It's about stopping them before they think they have a chance. The radio crackles again, another unit calling in coordinates, another observer spotting movement somewhere else along the line. Carter listens for a moment, then reaches for his map, already marking new positions. The battle is spreading, and everywhere, the same system is at work. Eyes on the ground, guns miles away, all connected by fragile radio signals and split-second decisions. For the Japanese forces advancing through Saipan, it's becoming something they've never faced before. An enemy that doesn't just react, but strikes at exactly the right moment. June 16, 1944. Artillery position, Western Saipan. The guns never stop moving. Sergeant Michael Donnelly wipes sweat from his brow as he watches his crew swing the barrel of their M2A1 105mm howitzer a few degrees to the right. The steel groans softly, settling into position as another set of coordinates comes down the line. Deflection set. One of the gunners calls, elevation, 312 mils. Another answers. Donnelly checks the figures against the fire direction center's board, a crude but effective system of plotting grids, angles, and corrections. It looks chaotic to an outsider. To them, it's a language. Load he, quick fuse, he orders. A shell is lifted, guided into the breach with practiced hands. The metallic click echoes sharply. Ready. Donnelly glances toward the small tent behind them, the Fire Direction Center, or FDC. Inside, officers and enlisted men hunch over maps, slide rules, and field phones. Every incoming call from the front passes through there. Every adjustment is calculated, refined, and relayed. It's the brain behind the gun's fire. The howitzer kicks violently, a burst of smoke and flame marking the shot. The shell arcs high into the sky, invisible within seconds, but it is not alone. All along this concealed line, dozens of guns fire in coordinated rhythm. Not blindly. Not independently. Together. Inside the FDC, Lieutenant Harold Green traces a finger along a grid map. A voice crackles through his headset. Another forward observer, another set of coordinates, confirmed. Adjusting battery spread, Green says. He scribbles numbers, calculates corrections, then calls out, battery, prepare to fire. New data follows. The system is fast, astonishingly fast. In earlier wars, artillery could take hours to coordinate. Messages delayed, targets lost, opportunities gone, but here, in 1944, everything has changed. Radio communication links the front lines directly to the guns. Observers like Carter act as the eyes. The FDC processes their vision into mathematics. And the batteries execute with mechanical precision. The result is something the enemy cannot predict. Outside, Donnelly watches another round leave the barrel. Feels like we're shooting blind. One of his crew mutters. Donnelly shakes his head. We're not blind, he says. We've got eyes up there. He jerks a thumb vaguely toward the front, toward men like Carter, lying in the dirt, watching, calling, guiding. Every shell's got a purpose. Miles away, that purpose becomes devastatingly clear. June 16, 1944. Japanese defensive line, Central Saipan. Corporal Hiroshi Tanaka presses himself into a shallow trench, his uniform soaked with sweat and dirt. The earlier barrage had shattered their advance, but now the shelling has returned, more precise, more relentless. He grips his Arisaka rifle tightly, scanning the tree line. There is no visible artillery. No aircraft overhead, nothing to explain the sudden, accurate strikes that seem to follow their every movement. Hold position, his sergeant shouts, but even as the order is given, another shell lands just beyond their line, too close, too exact. The ground convulses. Dirt rains down. Tanaka flinches, ears ringing. They know where we are, someone says, panic creeping into his voice. Tanaka doesn't respond, but the thought is already there, because it feels true every time they move. The shells follow, every time they gather. The explosions come faster. It is as if the battlefield itself is watching them. A runner stumbles into the trench, breathless, orders to reposition. He gasps. Fall back to secondary line. Tanaka nods, pulling himself up. They begin to move, carefully, cautiously. For a moment, there is silence, hope flickers, then, the sky screams again. The first shell lands directly along their retreat path, then another, and another. The timing is perfect, not early enough to miss them, not late enough to let them escape. Exactly when they are most exposed, Tanaka dives for cover, heart pounding in his chest. This is not random fire, this is something else, something faster than they can react to. A something they cannot see. Back at the American artillery line, Donnelly hears the distant echo of his battery's impact. He exhales, nodding slightly. Good shooting, he mutters, but even he doesn't fully see what's happening out there. The way timing and coordination are reshaping the battlefield itself for the Japanese troops under fire. The realization is beginning to settle in. They are not just fighting soldiers. They are fighting a system. One that strikes not with brute force alone, but with perfect timing. June 17, 1944. Broken Ridge Line, eastern Saipan. The rain begins without warning. It hammers against helmets and churned earth, turning the battlefield into a slick, muddy slope. Private First Class Daniel Reeves struggles to keep his footing as he moves along the ridge, rifle clutched tightly, every step threatening to send him sliding. Keep moving, a sergeant barks ahead, but movement has become dangerous, not because of the terrain, because of timing. Lieutenant James Carter lies prone again, rain dripping off the brim of his helmet and pooling around the radio set. His map is soaked, ink bleeding slightly, but the grid lines are still visible. They have to be. Observer to red battery, he calls, raising his voice over the storm. Enemy forming up behind ridge. Estimate platoon strength. Static answers him for a split second. The signal wavers. Carter's jaw tightens. In this system, this fragile network, seconds matter. A delay of even half a minute can mean the difference between stopping an attack and being overrun. Say again, red battery, do you copy? The radio crackles. Copy, observer. Send coordinates. Carter exhales, relief flashing briefly across his face. He rattles off the grid, adjusting for elevation and slope. His pencil scratches against wet paper, marking corrections instinctively behind the ridge, unseen by most of the American line. Japanese forces are gathering. Captain Kenji Sato crouches low, water streaming down his face as he studies the terrain ahead. His unit has learned from the past 2 days: move quickly, avoid open ground, strike hard before the artillery can respond. This time, we close the distance, he says quietly. His men nod, gripping their rifles, bayonets fixed. They are ready. They surge forward. On the American side, Carter watches through rain-streaked lenses. He sees them cresting the ridge. Too many, too close, fire mission, danger close. He shouts into the handset. Reeves hears the words and freezes. Danger close, artillery called in. Almost on top of their own position. You sure about that? The radio operator blurts. Carter doesn't hesitate. Fire for effect. Immediate. There is no time for adjustment rounds. No cautious calibration, only trust. Miles away, Sergeant Donnelly hears the urgency in the order relayed from the FDC. Danger close, one of the crew repeats, eyes widening slightly. Donnelly nods once. Set it. Quick fuse. We fire now. The guns are already aligned, the calculations are already made, all that remains is timing fire. The howitzer recoils violently, sending the first shell screaming into the storm. Back on the ridge, Reeves drops flat as the sound hits. Closer this time, louder, more terrifying. The first shell lands just beyond the crest, right in the path of the advancing Japanese troops. The explosion is immediate, violent, disorienting, but there's no pause. The second shell lands seconds later, slightly deeper, then a third. Each one walking forward with terrifying precision, cutting through the charge before it can fully form. Captain Sato sees the first blast and tries to redirect his men. Spread out. Move. The next explosion interrupts him. Dirt and shrapnel tear through the formation. Men scatter, some diving for cover, others caught mid-stride. The attack collapses almost as quickly as it began, not because of resistance, but because the timing has been broken. Carter lowers the binoculars slightly, tracking the impact pattern. Shift back 50, he says calmly. Keep them pinned. Reeves dares to lift his head. The ridge ahead is chaos, smoke, rain, shattered earth, but the enemy is no longer advancing. They can't. Every attempt to regroup is met with another precisely placed strike. Reeves looks toward Carter, disbelief written across his face. That was right on top of us. Carter doesn't respond immediately. He keeps watching, ensuring the barrage holds, that no gap forms, that no second wave breaks through. Only then does he speak. Better close than late. The words hang in the air, because out here, timing isn't just a tactical advantage. It's survival. For the Japanese troops caught in the open, the realization is even harsher. Their attacks are no longer failing because of numbers or courage, they are failing because every moment, every movement, is being answered faster than they can react, and in this kind of war, seconds decide everything. June 18, 1944. Jungle interior, central Saipan. The jungle is no longer a sanctuary. Corporal Hiroshi Tanaka moves carefully through the dense undergrowth, every step deliberate, every sound magnified. The canopy above blocks most of the light, casting the ground in shifting shadows. It should be perfect terrain for concealment. It always had been, but not anymore. Spread out, his sergeant whispers. No grouping. No noise. The men obey instantly. They've adapted, spacing themselves wider, moving slower, avoiding clear paths. The lessons have been brutal, but clear. Stay still too long, artillery finds you. Move too quickly, artillery follows you somewhere, unseen. The enemy is watching. Tanaka pauses, crouching behind a thick tree trunk. He scans the jungle ahead. There is no sign of Americans. No gunfire. No movement, only silence. For a moment, it feels safe. Hundreds of yards away, Lieutenant James Carter adjusts his position again, now perched on a slightly elevated patch of ground. The rain has eased, replaced by a heavy humidity that clings to everything. His binoculars sweep slowly this time. The enemy is harder to spot. They're learning. Reeves mutters beside him. Carter nods slightly. Yes, he says. They are. The Japanese troops are no longer bunching up. No longer charging in tight formations. They move in small groups, sometimes alone, blending into the terrain. It makes them harder to target, but not impossible. Carter lowers the binoculars and studies his map. Then he looks again, this time not for obvious movement, but for patterns, disturbed foliage, unnatural spacing. A flicker of motion where there should be none there, he says quietly. Reeves squints. I don't see anything. You're not looking for men, Carter replies. You're looking for signs of men. He raises the radio handset. Observer to red battery. Suspected movement along grid line. Echo 4. Request harassing fire. This time, the tone is different, not urgent, not immediate. Calculated. At the artillery line, Sergeant Donnelly receives the order and raises an eyebrow. Harassing fire, one of his crew asks. Donnelly nods. Yeah. We're not just reacting anymore. He gestures toward the gun. We're shaping the ground. The crew moves into action, loading shells with practiced efficiency. Fire at will. Spread pattern. The guns begin to fire, not in tight volleys, but in staggered intervals. The shells land across a wider area, unpredictable in timing, uneven in spacing. To an outside observer, it might seem less effective, less precise, but that's not the goal. Back in the jungle, Tanaka hears the first shell land far to his left. He freezes, another lands behind him, then one to the right. There is no clear pattern. No obvious target. The explosions are scattered, irregular. But they are everywhere. Keep moving, his sergeant whispers urgently, but moving feels just as dangerous as staying. Still, Tanaka darts forward, heart racing. A shell lands nearby, the blast knocking him off his feet. Dirt fills his mouth, his ears ringing. He scrambles up, disoriented. This isn't like before. The artillery came when they attacked, when they gathered, and now it comes even when they don't. The jungle offers no safety anymore. No rhythm to predict. No pause to exploit, only constant pressure. On the ridge, Reeves watches as distant explosions ripple through the tree line. They're not even shooting at anything specific, he says. Carter shakes his head. They are, he replies. Just not one thing. He points toward the jungle. They're hitting possibilities. Movement corridors. Places the enemy might use. Reeves frowns. So we're guessing? Carter allows himself a faint, tired smile. Not guessing, he says. Denying. He looks back through the binoculars. If they can't move without risk, they can't organize. And if they can't organize, he doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. I in the jungle. Tanaka feels it, the pressure, the uncertainty. Every step could trigger another strike, every pause could be the last. The coordination that once guided their movements, the timing of attacks, the flow of units is unraveling, not because of direct confrontation, but because the battlefield itself has become hostile. Unpredictable, controlled. Above the distant rumble of artillery, Tanaka hears something else. Silence between the blasts, short, uneven, untrustworthy. He tightens his grip on his rifle. For the first time since landing on Saipan, he cannot anticipate what comes next, and that, more than the explosions, is what truly breaks the rhythm. June 19, 1944. Fire Direction Center, Western Saipan. Inside the canvas tent, time is measured in seconds. Lieutenant Harold Green stands over a plotting board, grease pencil in hand, as coordinates stream in from multiple forward observers. The air is thick with heat and tension. Field phones ring. Radios crackle. Voices overlap, but nothing is wasted. Every word has purpose. New target, grid Charlie 7. A corporal calls out. Green marks it instantly, cross-referencing with existing fire missions. Which observer? Carter, sir. Same sector. Green nods. He trusts Carter. That matters. All right, priority target. Shift battery B and C, keep A on harassing fire. He doesn't look up as he speaks. His mind is already running ahead, calculating trajectories, factoring distance, elevation, time of flight at time on target. Another officer asks. Green pauses for half a second, then, make it simultaneous. The room still slightly at time on target. It's one of the most precise techniques they have. Instead of firing all guns at once, each battery fires at staggered times so that every shell arrives at the target at the exact same moment. No warning. No adjustment, just sudden, overwhelming impact. Get me the data, Green says. Slide rules move. Numbers are called out. Angles adjusted. Within moments, the plan is set. Outside, Sergeant Donnelly listens as the fire order comes through. A battery B, delay 3 seconds after mark. Battery C, delay 7. Confirm. Donnelly frowns slightly. They want TOT? The reply crackles back. Confirmed. All rounds impact together. Donnelly looks at his crew. All right, you heard it. This one's about timing. The men nod, suddenly more focused, because this isn't just firing, this is synchronization. Stand by, Donnelly says, watching his watch closely. He raises his hand. Mark. Battery A fires immediately. Donnelly counts under his breath. 1, 2, 3, fire. His gun roars to life. Somewhere further down the line, 7, fire. Another battery joins from the ground. It would sound staggered, uneven, but in the air, the shells converge. June 19, 1944. Jungle clearing, Central Saipan. Corporal Hiroshi Tanaka moves with a small group through a narrow clearing. It's one of the few open spaces they've found, a place to regroup, to catch breath, to re-establish some sense of order. For a moment, it feels almost calm or too calm. Tanaka glances upward instinctively. Nothing. No incoming whistle. No warning, just silence. Then everything hits at once. The clearing erupts in a single, massive detonation as multiple shells land simultaneously. The ground heaves violently, the air filled with dirt, smoke, and deafening noise. There is no time to react. No time to reun. No sequence to follow, just instant destruction. Tanaka is thrown backward, his vision blurring as the shockwave slams into him. Around him, the clearing disappears into chaos. Men who had been standing seconds ago are gone, caught in the sudden convergence. The effect is devastating, not just physically, but mentally, because there was no build-up. No pattern. No chance. Back at the FDC, Green listens as reports come in. Observer confirms impact, direct on target. Green exhales slowly. Good, he says, but there's no celebration, only the next set of coordinates, because this system, this clockwork of communication, calculation, and firepower never stops. On the ridge, Reeves stares toward the distant plume rising above the jungle. That was different, he says quietly. Carter nods. Time on target, he replies. Reeves shakes his head. They didn't even hear it coming. Carter lowers his binoculars. That's the point. He looks out over the battlefield, where smoke now marks the place of impact. When everything lands at once, there's no warning to react to. Reeves swallows, the realization settling in. This isn't just about hitting the enemy. It's about removing their ability to respond entirely. In the shattered clearing, Tanaka struggles to breathe, ears ringing, body trembling. He tries to push himself up, but his arms shake uncontrollably around him. the survivors, those who remain, are disoriented, stunned into silence. No one speaks, because no one understands how it happened, how so many shells could arrive at the exact same instant, how the timing could be that precise. Tanaka looks up, his expression dazed. For the first time, the thought becomes unavoidable: this is not just artillery. This is coordination beyond anything they have faced. A system that does not merely react, but anticipates, and strikes with the precision of a clock. June 20, 1944. Northern Sector, Saipan. Dawn breaks under a low ceiling of gray clouds. Captain Kenji Sato crouches inside a hastily reinforced command dugout, the air thick with damp earth and tension. A field map is spread before him, weighed down at the corners by ammunition clips. Runners come and go, delivering fragmented reports, units scattered, positions shifting, communication breaking down. Where is second platoon? Sato demands. A young runner hesitates. And no contact, sir. Last seen near the ridge, then artillery. He doesn't finish. He doesn't need to. Sato clenches his jaw. It's happening again, not just attacks being stopped, but coordination being severed. Orders are not reaching units. Units are moving without synchronization. Every attempt to regroup is interrupted. Timed strikes landing not just on troops, but on the spaces between them. On the connections, the Americans, Sato murmurs, staring at the map, they are targeting our movement and our communication. Another distant explosion punctuates the thought. Closer this time. June 20, 1944. Forward slope, overlooking Japanese positions. Lieutenant James Carter adjusts his binoculars, focusing not on individual soldiers, but on patterns of activity. He watches a runner move between tree lines, then another. Small, fast movements, easy to miss, but not to him. There, he says quietly. Reeves leans closer. Just one guy. Carter shakes his head. Not just a runner, he replies. A link. He lowers the binoculars and grabs the radio. Observer to red battery. Interdiction fire. Grid Delta 9. Target, movement between positions. The radio operator glances at him. You're hitting messengers? Carter nods once. If orders don't get through, nothing else works. At the artillery line, Sergeant Donnelly hears the new fire mission and exhales slowly. They're not even letting them talk now, one of his crew says. Donnelly doesn't respond immediately. He watches as the gun is adjusted, the crew moving with quiet efficiency. War's not just about shooting what you see, he says finally, it's about breaking how the enemy functions. Fire. The shell launches, then another, not concentrated on a single point, but spaced along likely routes. Time to disrupt movement. Back in the jungle, Tanaka stumbles forward, his breath ragged. He clutches a message tube tightly. Orders from Sato's command post, instructions to reposition and consolidate what remains of their unit. He moves quickly, staying low, weaving through cover. He's done this before. He knows the routes, but today, something feels wrong, too quiet. He slows slightly, scanning the trees and nothing. He takes another step, but the shell lands ahead of him. The explosion throws him backward, the message tube flying from his grasp. Dirt and debris rain down, the shockwave knocking the breath from his lungs. He lies there, stunned, ears ringing, the message, gone on the path, destroyed. He tries to push himself up, panic rising. Another shell lands nearby, then another, not aimed directly at him, but at the route he was taking. At the space between positions. At the invisible lines that connect one unit to another. On the ridge, Carter watches the impacts carefully. I just left 30, he says. Keep pressure on that corridor. Reeves frowns. They're not even fighting back there. Carter doesn't look away. They don't have to be, he replies. If they can't coordinate, they can't fight effectively anywhere. He lowers the binoculars, his expression hard. You don't just break soldiers, he adds quietly, you break the system that holds them together. In the command dugout, Sato receives another report. Runner lost. Message not delivered. He closes his eyes briefly. This is the third time, maybe the fourth. He's lost track. Every attempt to issue orders, intercepted by fire that arrives too quickly, too precisely. It's no longer coincidence. It's designed. He looks at the map again, but it feels different now. The lines that once represented control, unit boundaries, communication routes, fallback positions, are meaningless if they cannot be maintained outside. Another barrage lands, closer than before. The ground shakes. Sato opens his eyes. For the first time, doubt creeps in, not in the courage of his men, but in the structure of their defense, because the Americans are not just attacking positions, they are attacking timing, flow, connection, and with each perfectly timed strike, the network that holds his forces together weakens further until eventually there may be nothing left to hold. June 22, 1944. Slopes below Mount Tapasho, Saipan. The wind carries ash and dust down the incline, stinging eyes and filling lungs. Private First Class Daniel Reeves climbs slowly, boots slipping against loose volcanic rock. Around him, scattered units of American infantry advance in short bursts, move, stop, scan, repeat, but something has changed. The resistance is no longer coordinated, there are still shots isolated, sudden. A rifle cracks from somewhere ahead, then silence. A machine gun rattles briefly from a concealed position, only to be silenced moments later by a precisely placed artillery strike. Reeves ducks instinctively as another shell whistles overhead. He doesn't even flinch as much this time. He knows what's coming. The explosion lands beyond the ridge, exactly where the gunfire had originated. He exhales. They barely get a shot off anymore, he says beside him. Carter lowers his binoculars. They don't have time, he replies, further up the slope, Captain. Kenji Sato gathers what remains of his command group. The dugout is gone, collapsed under earlier bombardment. Now they operate from shallow cover, constantly shifting, never staying in one place for long, but movement itself has become a risk. We must take the initiative, Sato says, his voice firm despite the exhaustion. His officers nod, though their faces betray doubt. Initiative used to mean speed. Surprise. Coordinated attack. Now every attempt to act is met with immediate response. Still, they prepare. A small unit is assembled. Orders are given quickly, quietly. The plan is simple: a sudden push down the slope, hit the American line before artillery can be called. It has to work. It's the only way it go. Sato orders, the men move out. Carter sees them almost immediately, and not because they're careless, but because they have no time to hide properly there, he says, already reaching for the radio observer to Red Battery. Immediate fire mission. Grid Foxtrot 2. Troops in the open. No hesitation. No delay. The system responds instantly. At the artillery line, Donnelly hears the urgency, immediate suppression. The order comes. He doesn't even need to think anymore. Load and fire. The gun roars. On the slope, the Japanese unit breaks into a run. For a moment, it almost works. They move fast, closing distance, weapons ready. Then the first shell lands, too close, too soon. The formation breaks instinctively. Some dive for cover, others try to push forward. The second shell lands deeper, cutting off their path. The third lands behind them. Within seconds, the attack dissolves into chaos. No momentum. No follow through. It just disruption. Sato watches from above, his expression hardening. They cannot complete an action. One of his officers says quietly. Sato doesn't respond immediately, because it's true. Every attempt to act, to seize control, to dictate the pace, is interrupted before it can fully unfold. Not by overwhelming force, but by timing. Perfect, relentless timing. On the American side, Reeves watches the distant explosions ripple across the slope. They didn't even get halfway, he says. Carter nods. They can't build momentum, he replies. Reeves frowns. Momentum? Carter looks at him briefly. In a fight, you need time to act. To move, to react, to follow through, he explains. If something hits you before you finish, he gestures toward the battlefield, you never get there. Reeves looks back out, understanding dawning. It's not just that the enemy is being hit. It's that they are being stopped mid-action. Every time. Below, Tanaka crouches behind a rock, breathing heavily. He had been part of the push, one of the few who made it back. He stares down the slope, where smoke now marks the failed attack. His hands tremble slightly, not from fear alone, but from frustration. They had moved fast, they had acted decisively, and still, it wasn't enough, because the response came too quickly, too precisely. As if the moment they chose to act had already been anticipated. He grips his rifle tighter. For the first time, the thought becomes clear in his mind. It is not just that the Americans are strong, it is that they are always ready, always connected, always watching, and always just in time. On the ridge, Carter listens as the radio quiets for a moment. No new targets. No new movement. He lowers the handset slowly around him. The battlefield feels different now, less chaotic, more controlled, not because the fighting has stopped, but because one side has lost the ability to shape it. And the other hasn't. Reeves looks at him. Is it over? He asks. Carter scans the horizon one more time. Smoke rises in thin columns. No organized movement. No new formations. Not yet, he says then, after a pause, but they're running out of ways to fight back. June 25, 1944. Northern Cliffs, Saipan. The ocean crashes violently against the rocks below, sending plumes of white spray into the air. The sound is constant, deep, thunderous, unyielding. It drowns out distant gunfire, muffles explosions, and fills the spaces between with a heavy, final silence. Private First Class Daniel Reeves crouches behind a jagged outcrop, peering toward the cliffs ahead. The terrain is broken, uneven, full of narrow paths, hidden pockets, and steep drops, hard place to fight, he mutters. Lieutenant James Carter lies beside him, binoculars raised, hard place to coordinate, he replies. That's what matters now, not just where the enemy is, but whether they can still function as a unit. Further ahead, scattered Japanese forces cling to the terrain. Small groups, isolated, cut off from one another. There are no clear lines anymore. No structured defense, only fragments. Corporal Hiroshi Tanaka sits in a shallow depression, his back against cold stone. His uniform is torn, his face streaked with dirt and exhaustion. Around him, a handful of soldiers remain silent, withdrawn, waiting. There are no new orders. No runners. No signals. The system that once guided them, already strained, has finally broken. A young soldier looks at him. What do we do now? Tanaka doesn't answer immediately, because there is no clear answer. On the ridge behind them, Carter adjusts his radio observer to red battery. Confirm status. Any active fire missions in sector? The reply comes after a brief pause, negative. No confirmed targets. Carter lowers the handset slightly. That's new. For days, there had always been something: movement, regrouping, attempts to push forward. Now, nothing. Reeves glances at him. So, they're gone? Carter shakes his head. No, he says quietly. They're still out there. He looks back through the binoculars, scanning carefully. They're just not moving the same way anymore. Tanaka hears it before he understands it. Silence, not complete silence, but the absence of something that had become constant, the artillery. For the first time in days, there are no incoming shells. No distant thunder. No sudden impacts. He slowly lifts his head, listening. Nothing. The young soldier beside him exhales shakily. Maybe it's over? Tanaka doesn't respond, because something about the silence feels wrong, unnatural, like a pause, not an end. Back on the American side, Carter studies the terrain with growing intensity. They're still there, he says again. Reeves frowns. Then why aren't they moving? Carter lowers the binoculars. Because they can't. He gestures toward the cliffs, the broken terrain, the scattered positions. They've lost communication. Lost coordination. Every time they tried to regroup, we hit them. Reeves nods slowly. And now? Carter pauses. Now they're isolated. A sudden crack of rifle fire echoes from the cliffs. Reeves ducks instinctively. Contact. Carter raises the binoculars again. A small group, 3, maybe 4 Japanese soldiers, emerges briefly from cover, firing toward an advancing American patrol. It's disorganized, desperate, but it's still a fight. Carter reaches for the radio, then hesitates. He watches for a moment longer. The group doesn't move together. There's no coordination, just individual reactions, each man acting on his own. He slowly lowers the handset. No fire mission, he says. Reeves looks at him, surprised. Why not? Carter keeps watching. Because they're not maneuvering, he replies. They're not coordinating. They're not a unit anymore. Another burst of rifle fire, then silence again. Tanaka hears the shots nearby. He grips his rifle, instincts kicking in, but there are no orders. No direction. No sense of where to go or what to do next. He looks at the men around him, each one waiting, each one alone. Even in the presence of others, the system is gone, and without it, everything else begins to unravel. On the ridge, Carter finally lowers his binoculars completely. 4 days, his role had been constant: observe, call, adjust, strike. Now there is nothing to call. No patterns to track. No movements to anticipate, only fragments. Reeves watches him. So that's it, he asks. Carter exhales slowly. And not quite, he says. He looks out over the cliffs one last time. The fighting's still there. He pauses, but the timing, the coordination, he shakes his head slightly. That's gone. Below, Tanaka stares out toward the ocean. The waves crash endlessly, indifferent to the battle above. For the first time, he understands what has truly been lost, not just positions, not just men, but the ability to act together. To move as one. To respond in time. He closes his eyes briefly, because without that, there is no strategy left. No rhythm. No control, only isolated moments, fading into silence. July 9, 1944. Saipan secured. The island is quiet in a way that feels unfamiliar, not peaceful, just still. Smoke lingers in thin, fading columns across the ridgelines. Burned out positions dot the landscape. The jungle, once alive with movement and hidden threats, now stands silent, its edges scarred by weeks of bombardment. Private First Class Daniel Reeves walks slowly along a dirt track carved by tanks and artillery vehicles. His boots crunch against spent shell fragments scattered across the ground. Everywhere he looks, there are signs of what happened here, but not all of it is visible. Near a former observation point, Lieutenant James Carter sits on an overturned crate, his helmet resting beside him. The SCR-300 radio was silent now, its antenna collapsed, its purpose fulfilled. He studies his map one last time, the grid lines are still there, the markings, the corrections, each pencil stroke represents a moment, a decision made in seconds that changed something miles away. Reeves approaches, glancing down at the map, all those lines, he says. Carter nods, every one of them was a call. Reeves crouches beside him. You ever think about it? He asks. How fast it all happened. Carter leans back slightly, considering. Not at the time, he says. You don't have the luxury. He taps the map lightly. You see something, you call it in. Seconds later, it's gone. Reeves exhales. They never had a chance to react. Carter looks out toward the distant hills. That's the point, he says quietly. Miles away, at the artillery line, Sergeant Michael Donnelly oversees the slow process of packing equipment. The guns that had fired thousands of rounds now sit idle, their barrels darkened from heat and use. His crew works in silence, disassembling, cleaning, preparing to move. One of them picks up a shell casing, turning it in his hands. Hard to believe how many of these we sent out, he says. Donnelly nods, yeah. The soldier hesitates. Do you think they ever figured it out? Donnelly looks out toward the island's interior. Figured what out? The soldier shrugs. How we hit them so perfectly. All the time. Donnelly doesn't answer right away, because the truth isn't simple. The IT wasn't just the guns or the shells or even the observers. IT was all of it, working together. Maybe, he says finally, or maybe they just knew, it kept happening. Near the northern cliffs, a small group of captured Japanese soldiers sits under guard. Among them is Corporal Hiroshi Tanaka. He stares out at the ocean, the same endless waves crashing against the rocks below, but now, there is no urgency. No incoming fire. No decisions to make in seconds, only reflection. An American interpreter stands nearby, speaking quietly with one of the prisoners. Occasionally, a question is asked. Occasionally, an answer is given. When the interpreter approaches Tanaka, he pauses. You fought here, he asks. Tanaka nods once. The interpreter hesitates, then gestures vaguely inland. The artillery, he says. You remember it? Tanaka's expression tightens slightly. Yes. The interpreter studies him. What did you think was happening? Tanaka is silent for a long moment, then, slowly, we thought, he begins, choosing his words carefully, that you could see everything. The interpreter raises an eyebrow. Everything? Tanaka nods. Every movement. Every step. Every attempt to gather. He looks down briefly, then back toward the sea. No matter when we moved, it came. He pauses. Not early. Not late. His voice is steady, always, at the right moment. Back at the ridge, Carter folds his map carefully, slipping it into his pack. Reeves watches him. So what made the difference, he asks. Carter stands, picking up his helmet. He looks out over the island one last time, the ridges, the jungle, the paths where everything had unfolded. It wasn't just firepower, he says. Reeves waits. Carter meets his gaze. It was time. Because on Saipan, the Americans didn't just bring artillery, they brought a system. A network of eyes, voices, and calculations that turned seconds into weapons. They didn't wait for the enemy to act, they answered the moment it began, and in doing so, they changed the nature of the battlefield itself. For the Japanese forces, it was something unfamiliar. Something impossible to counter in time. An enemy that didn't just strike hard, but struck exactly when it mattered most. The island remains quiet now, but beneath that silence lies the memory of a different kind of warfare. One where victory wasn't just measured in territory or numbers, but in timing so precise, it left the enemy with no moment left to respond.